A case so upsetting.
Evidence of concealment of injuries with makeup.
It's left its mark on everyone.
She left law enforcement after this case and still suffers mental and emotional trauma from her involvement in this case and the memories of its events.
The judge spending nearly 2 minutes
round scars consistent with cigarette burns,
listing all the injuries reported on Angelina's autopsy.
Her injuries were too numerous to count. Her life was a life of perpetual pain.
They say the heart of man is wicked, but who knows if the man in that phrase referred only to Miller and Brenda? Some people are born with red hair, blue eyes, etc. For Miller and Brenda, wickedness was the hemoglobin that gave their blood color, and this kept them going and alive. The case of Angelina Costello shattered the quiet facade of a seemingly normal neighborhood. Behind closed doors, evil thrived in the most ordinary of places. A home that should have been filled with laughter and love became a prison of torment and suffering. The very hands that should have wiped away tears were the ones inflicting wounds that would never heal. Society often looks away from such stories, uncomfortable with the darkness they reveal about human nature. But turning a blind eye is what allows monsters to flourish. In this investigation, we peel back the layers of deception, the missed signals, and the institutional failures that allowed this tragedy to unfold. She didn't look 3 to me, she looked like a Holocaust victim. The description in that statement is wild, and the imagery is one that is filled with excruciating pain and agony. Angelina Costello weighed 13 pounds. Her ribs were visible, her legs and arms thin and covered in bruises, burn marks on her face and chest. She was put in the worst state that is for any living to bear, and this was not a punishment for a wrong she had committed. This was just done because her mom was evil and loved to watch evil. As you witness this story, you'll question everything you thought you knew about evil. It doesn't always announce itself with horns and a pitchfork. Sometimes it smiles at you in the grocery store. Sometimes it lives on your street. Sometimes it tucks children in at night. You can't say you don't want to know the full story because it's pertinent to always be in the know, and insight can only come from knowledge. So sit back and watch how the story unfolds. What twisted path led to this unimaginable outcome? Where were the neighbors, the teachers, the relatives who might have seen? How does a mother's instinct to protect become so fundamentally corrupted? What demons haunted the minds of those who should have been her sanctuary? And perhaps most chilling of all, could this happen again, right next door to you? The story of Angelina Costello isn't just a tragedy, it's a wake-up call, a reminder that vigilance is the price we pay for the safety of the innocent, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones we never suspect. Welcome to Detective Jeffery Crime Station. A huge thank you to our amazing subscribers and viewers for joining us on this journey into the world of true crime. We're honored that you've chosen to spend your time with us, and we're grateful for your trust and support. If you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to stay up to date on our latest captivating stories. Your engagement means the world to us, and we can't wait to share more thrilling and thought-provoking content with you. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the quiet Grant Avenue neighborhood in Ogden that July morning. But inside one particular home, a darkness had long since settled. It was there, in the middle of a sparse living room, that little Angelina Costello's journey had come to an end. Her tiny body wrapped in a pink blanket that seemed too vibrant against her pallid skin. Miller Costello was 25 and Brenda Emile just 23 when they became parents to Angelina. They were young, perhaps too young for the responsibility that parenthood demanded. But youth alone could not explain what transpired within the walls of their home over the course of their daughter's short life. In the beginning, their family had appeared normal from the outside. A young couple with 3 children, trying to make their way in the world. Yet behind closed doors, a sinister reality had been unfolding, one marked by cruelty that defied comprehension. Angelina's torment had begun long before that fatal day in July, more than a year earlier, when she should have been toddling around with the boundless energy of a child discovering the world. She was already experiencing the bitter taste of rejection. While her siblings played and laughed on their parents' bed, Angelina stood alone, facing the corner of the room. Her small arms, which should have been reaching out for toys or hugs, were instead marked with bruises and scabs, visible signs of suffering that went unaddressed. Food, a basic necessity and often a source of comfort for children, became an instrument of torture in Angelina's world. Brenda Emile, the woman who should have nurtured and protected her daughter, instead took perverse pleasure in taunting the hungry child. "Ha ha, no food for you," she had cruelly declared as she pulled away a forkful of scrambled eggs that she had tantalizingly held out to Angelina. The young girl's gaunt face had registered confusion and hurt, emotions too complex for her young mind to fully process, yet visceral enough to be captured on the video later found on her mother's phone. The torment escalated. In another disturbing video recorded months before her death, Angelina was seen curled up on the floor, blood streaming from her nose as she obediently ate slices of raw onion at her father's command. Miller Costello, who would later admit to police that he knew what was right but failed to do it, stood by and recorded this act of submission, documenting his daughter's suffering rather than ending it. As time passed, Angelina's body began to reflect the abuse more starkly. Her once chubby cheeks hollowed, her limbs grew thin, and her ribs became prominently visible beneath her skin. She was fading away before her parents' eyes, and still they did nothing to save her. In fact, Miller Costello later confessed to Detective Travis Curl that his wife would become angry if he attempted to feed Angelina, a admission that revealed both his awareness of the situation and his cowardice in addressing it. By the time Officer Sitka Hrabal entered the Costello Emile home on July 6th, responding to a report of an unconscious child, Angelina was beyond saving. The officer had been told that the child was 3 years old, but the sight that greeted her defied belief. "She didn't look 3 to me," Hrabal would later testify, her voice thick with emotion. "She looked like a Holocaust victim." Angelina, a child who should have been vibrant and growing, weighed just 13 pounds, less than many newborns. The extent of Angelina's injuries was not immediately apparent. In a macabre attempt to conceal the evidence of their abuse, Brenda Emile had applied makeup to the burn marks on her daughter's face and chest. It was only upon closer examination that the full horror of what Angelina had endured became clear. Burns, bruises, and the devastating effects of prolonged starvation and malnutrition. Even in death, Angelina could not escape her mother's lies. When questioned by authorities, Brenda Emile spun a web of falsehoods to explain her daughter's condition. The bruises, she claimed, were the result of a fall in a bounce house just days before. The burn marks, she insisted, had come from sparklers during 4th of July celebrations when the children had gotten too close to the fireworks. These were the desperate fabrications of a woman attempting to evade responsibility for what Deputy Weber County Attorney Christopher Shaw would later describe as a life of torture. The truth, as medical examiners would determine, was far more sinister. Angelina had not died from a single incident or accident. Her death was the culmination of extended suffering, the result of blunt force trauma, burns, and the systematic deprivation of food and care. It was, as Officer Chris Bishop grimly noted, the worst case of child abuse I've ever seen. As the legal proceedings unfolded in 2nd District Judge Michael Durita's courtroom, the raw emotions surrounding Angelina's death erupted in an unexpected outburst. Brenda Emile's mother, already burdened with the knowledge of her grandchild's suffering, was asked to leave the courtroom as she might be called as a witness at trial, but grief and rage overcame her sense of decorum. Minutes later, she burst back through the courtroom doors, her anguished cry echoing off the walls. "You killed my baby, mother..." The outburst, directed at her own daughter and son-in-law, led to her arrest for contempt of court, a testament to the rippling effects of Angelina's tragedy beyond her immediate family. In the wake of this unimaginable loss, there remained a glimmer of hope for Angelina's siblings. The 2 other children, who had lived alongside their sister but had seemingly been spared her fate, were removed from the home in July and placed in the care of the Utah Division of Child and Family Services. They would have a chance at the life that Angelina never knew, one of safety, care, and the simple dignity that every child deserves. As Miller Costello and Brenda Emile faced the weight of first-degree felony charges for aggravated murder, the community of Ogden was left to grapple with the knowledge that such profound suffering had occurred in their midst. How could a child waste away to 13 pounds without someone noticing? How could parents inflict such cruelty on their own flesh and blood? These were questions without satisfactory answers, a reminder of the darkness that can exist behind closed doors, and the responsibility shared by all to protect the most vulnerable among us. The preliminary hearing was set to continue with testimony from medical examiners and others who had been part of the investigation. Judge Durita would then determine if there was sufficient evidence for the case to proceed to trial. But regardless of the legal outcome, nothing could restore what had been lost. A small life, full of potential, extinguished by the very hands that should have nurtured it. Angelina's story, though marked by unspeakable tragedy, would stand as a somber reminder of the crucial importance of vigilance, intervention, and the unwavering protection of children in a world where not all parents fulfill their sacred obligation to love and care for their young. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel as a means of encouraging us. Thank you as you do so. The hearing on Tuesday painted a harrowing picture of the final months of Angelina's life, a 3-year-old girl from Ogden whose tragic death on July 7, 2017 was the focus of the proceedings. Dr. Antoinette Lasky, a pediatrics professor at the University of Utah School of Medicine and an expert witness for the prosecution, described the girl's decline as catastrophic. Through photos and videos taken by Angelina's parents, the court was shown the stark contrast between her condition in December 2016 and June 2017. In the earlier images, there was still a sense of hope in her appearance, but by the summer of 2017, that hope had vanished. Dr. Lasky testified that Angelina's condition by then was one of terminal malnutrition, a state so severe that even extreme medical intervention could not have saved her. Angelina's body had been ravaged by starvation. Dr. Lasky explained that as her body consumed its fat reserves, it turned to her muscles and finally to the fat surrounding her nerve cells. This process left her unable to think or function. At the time of her death, she weighed only 14 pounds, a fraction of the average 31 pounds for a healthy 3-year-old. Dr. Lasky described the physical toll of starvation in detail, noting that Angelina's body had done everything it could to preserve her brain, but even that effort had failed in the end. By June 2017, her condition was irreversible. "You literally watched starvation happen before your eyes," Dr. Lasky said. The physical damage extended beyond malnutrition. Angelina's nose and mouth bore the marks of severe trauma. The cartilage on the right side of her nose was destroyed, and had she survived, she would have required reconstructive surgery using tissue from her ear. Her mouth was a source of constant pain, with broken teeth, lacerations, and damage to the tissue connecting her lower lip to her gums. Even simple actions like talking or drinking water caused her agony. Dr. Lasky emphasized that Angelina's suffering was not only physical but also psychological. She understood the taunting she endured, such as being offered food only to have it withdrawn. The lack of love, affection, and comfort left deep emotional scars. For the final 7 months of her life, Angelina lived in what felt like an eternity of pain and neglect. Dr. Lasky noted that 20% of her short life had been marked by suffering, a staggering proportion for a child so young. The hearing itself was not without drama. Angelina's mother, Emile, initially refused to be transported from the Weber County Jail, citing struggles with her mental health. Her attorney, Jason Widdison, explained that she felt unable to control her emotions in court and had requested to speak with a mental health counselor before attending. The delay pushed the hearing back by over half an hour, but Emile eventually arrived and the proceedings continued without further disruption. Tensions in the courtroom remained palpable, particularly given the history of conflict between Emile and her partner, Costello. In their plea bargain statements, both had blamed each other for their daughter's death, a tragic reflection of the fractured environment in which Angelina had lived. The hearing on Tuesday painted a disheartening picture of the final months of Angelina's life, a 3-year-old girl from Ogden, whose tragic death on July 7, 2017, was the focus of the proceedings. Dr. Antoinette Lasky, a pediatrics professor at the University of Utah School of Medicine and an expert witness for the prosecution, described the girl's decline as catastrophic. Through photos and videos taken by Angelina's parents, the court was shown the stark contrast between her condition in December 2016 and June 2017. In the earlier images, there was still a sense of hope in her appearance, but by the summer of 2017, that hope had vanished. Dr. Lasky testified that Angelina's condition by then was one of terminal malnutrition, a state so severe that even extreme medical intervention could not have saved her. Angelina's body had been ravaged by starvation. Dr. Lasky explained that as her body consumed its fat reserves, it turned to her muscles and finally to the fat surrounding her nerve cells. This process left her unable to think or function. At the time of her death, she weighed only 14 pounds, a fraction of the average 31 pounds for a healthy 3-year-old. Dr. Lasky described the physical toll of starvation in detail, noting that Angelina's body had done everything it could to preserve her brain, but even that effort had failed in the end. By June 2017, her condition was irreversible. "You literally watched starvation happen before your eyes," Dr. Lasky said. The physical damage extended beyond malnutrition. Angelina's nose and mouth bore the marks of severe trauma. The cartilage on the right side of her nose was destroyed, and had she survived, she would have required reconstructive surgery using tissue from her ear. Her mouth was a source of constant pain, with broken teeth, lacerations, and damage to the tissue connecting her lower lip to her gums. Even simple actions like talking or drinking water caused her agony. Dr. Lasky emphasized that Angelina's suffering was not only physical but also psychological. She understood the taunting she endured, such as being offered food only to have it withdrawn. The lack of love, affection, and comfort left deep emotional scars. For the final 7 months of her life, Angelina lived in what felt like an eternity of pain and neglect. Dr. Lasky noted that 20% of her short life had been marked by suffering, a staggering proportion for a child so young. The hearing itself was not without drama. Angelina's mother, Emile, initially refused to be transported from the Weber County Jail, citing struggles with her mental health. Her attorney, Jason Widdison, explained that she felt unable to control her emotions in court and had requested to speak with a mental health counselor before attending. The delay pushed the hearing back by over half an hour, but Emile eventually arrived and the proceedings continued without further disruption. Tensions in the courtroom remained palpable, particularly given the history of conflict between Emile and her partner, Costello. In their plea bargain statements, both had blamed each other for their daughter's death, a tragic reflection of the fractured environment in which Angelina had lived. Brenda Emile's sentencing was scheduled for October, but just as the proceedings were about to begin, she made a shocking request. She asked to withdraw her guilty plea. Over the following weeks, during multiple hearings, Emile's story shifted repeatedly. In November, she told 2nd District Court Judge Michael Dorita that she had been threatened during phone calls with family members prior to pleading guilty in August to aggravated murder, a first-degree felony. She claimed that her son's life had been threatened, which pressured her into accepting the plea deal. When asked why she hadn't raised these concerns during her initial plea hearing, Emile responded, "My son's life was more important than mine." She added that she had since received assurances that her children were safe and insisted that evidence of the threats could be found in her jail phone calls. However, prosecutor Letitia Toombs disputed Emile's claims. Her team had reviewed the jail phone calls and found no evidence of any threats against Emile or her children. Faced with this contradiction, Emile eventually withdrew her request to rescind her guilty plea. But Judge Doretta, concerned about the seriousness of her allegations, ordered a thorough review of the phone calls to ensure there was no doubt about the voluntariness of her plea. The process was complicated by the fact that some of the calls were in a Romanian dialect unfamiliar to the court translator, making them difficult to interpret. During a hearing in November, Toombs played a 12-minute phone call from August 16, 2022, between Emile and her mother. In the recording, Emile's mother repeatedly pressured her not to take the plea deal. Emile, however, could be heard saying, "I failed to protect a baby under my care. That's all juror members are going to look at. I'm pleading guilty for not doing my part as a mother." Toombs argued that Emile had known all along that Miller Costello, the father of the deceased child and the person she accused of threatening her, was never going to be released from jail. Costello had pleaded guilty to aggravated murder in October. Toombs also pointed out that Emile had never mentioned the alleged threats to her attorneys or the court over the past year, nor could she provide specific details about when the threats had occurred. Emile, however, maintained that the threats had caused her immense distress to the point where she vomited and cried herself to sleep. She claimed she had wanted to take the case to trial to be a voice for her daughter, but felt she couldn't due to the alleged threats. Judge D. Rita, known for his thoroughness during plea hearings, expressed frustration with Emile's inconsistency. He noted that the court had gone to great lengths to investigate her claims, even bending over backward to ensure fairness, but had found no evidence to support her allegations. The court simply cannot pick and choose which statements are true and which statements are not true, DeRita said. My view is that I simply cannot trust Ms. Emile's communication. After a week of hearings, 2nd District Judge Michael Dorita will determine the sentences for Miller Costello, 30, and Brenda Emile, 28. They face either 25 years to life in prison or life without the possibility of parole. Both defendants entered plea bargains to avoid the death penalty. Neither Emile nor Costello had sought medical attention for Angelina, fearing that authorities would take their children away. Their neglect and abuse culminated in the unimaginable suffering and death of a child who had been denied the most basic care and compassion. As the legal proceedings dragged on, the story of Angelina's short life served as a grim reminder of the consequences of neglect and cruelty, and the justice system's struggle to hold those responsible accountable. The story of Angelina's short life was one of unimaginable suffering, marked by physical decline, psychological torment, and a profound lack of care. Her final months were a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of neglect and abuse. We hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. Because you did, subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to show your appreciation. Additionally, tap the notification bell to be kept abreast with our latest videos and ensure you don't miss out on any new content. This will keep you informed about our upcoming true crime stories and allow you to stay engaged with our community. Thank you once again. Your support means a lot to us.